Previously on Pacific Crest, the series. Finally, I had to reach my turn, heading towards Lippincott Pass. It was getting late in the day and the shadows were long, but I anticipated the road being a lot like the road had been throughout the day, so I just let it ride. And then, this happened.
Big rocks! Big rocks!
As you can see, from both angles, it doesn't appear like there's anything there. But just the way the hill was shaped and the way the shadows went across the road, I couldn't see that the road was washed away until it was way too late. As you can see, the truck falls in and doesn't come in contact with the ground until it's the bank on the opposite side. My calculations put the dynamic force at somewhere around 18 tons being applied to the frame as it hit the washout. The back of the camper through the back window collapses. When it makes that bucking motion, it completely separates away from the truck and then comes back in for one more hit. The radiator is leaking. I use that term lightly. From somewhere. The radiator wasn't just leaking, it was hemorrhaging. All of the fluid had poured out. Later on, I'd found out that the radiator had been grenaded when the front suspension hit the embankment. So that sucks. As you can see, the tray is pulling off the truck bed. The frame has buckled. I was about 40 miles from the paved road. I was completely stranded. I knew I had to come up with a plan. I just wasn't sure what it was going to be. Hey, I'm Austin with WolfPac-Outdoors, and I've set out on the Pacific Crest Overland Route to find and explore the last few remaining wild places in California. Welcome to my adventure. Welcome to Pacific Crest, the series. California, Episode 5, Beyond the Unknown. Proudly presented by Norworld Australia. When your adventure demands built to last, demand Norworld. In association with 4-Wheel Campers. Find your adventure. And from viewers like you, I truly appreciate and thank you for your continued support. Progressing up Lippincott Pass was daunting. I was solely focused on maintaining the integrity of the vehicle, praying it could be fixed if I ever made it back to town. But in all reality, it really wasn't that sensational. I broke it down, and after a ton of trial and error, I was able to come up with a plan. I did my best to calculate every move that I was going to make and the ripples that would be affecting my future. I made it a methodical process. I wanted to figure out how much water my radiator would consume. I figured out that I could run the truck for 7 or 8 minutes and then let it cool down for 45. I wanted to ensure or know how much the truck was pulling itself apart. During these intervals, I would perform a full walk around, checking the radiator, filling it with as much as it would hold, which really turned out to be fruitless in the end. And I started measuring the distance the camper was coming off the cab. And I gotta go in 4 low first gear, and this is super sketch with heck of fallout all over the place and super off camber, seatbelt action, because this is totally off the rails. Oh, pucker, 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 pucker. Jesus, is the back gonna rip off? I don't even know, man. After adding my emotions to that checklist, things started to progress a lot more smoothly. As a matter of fact, my emotions got pretty wild. I remembered some training I had a while back, and I really did start cycling through nearly every emotion that I knew how to feel, and even some I didn't, about every hour. Now is the time to fight for being beyond where we're at. So let's get back to it. There's no sense in sitting here for too long. We did have to let the engine cool down, but I think it's cool now, so let's get to it.
No big deal. We got this.
After a close look into the radiator, I knew I didn't have the supplies on hand to properly fix it. The lesson here is to bring radiator repair goo in my kit. And short of having a welding kit and gusset plates, the frame was going to have to survive. I've talked about self-recovery many times before. And I've talked about how self-recovery can be very tedious and excruciating. Well, this is one of those times of doing the same exact shit over and over and over again in hopes that it leads to something positive. I couldn't believe it, and what had felt like a sleepless night, I had finally crested the pass and came down into racetrack playa. Check it out. It's where I had planned to stay the night before. I wanted to give myself time to decompress, to reassess, and to watch the sunrise. Through the night going up the pass, I had ripped through my underbelly tank in the tray, which was just about 10 gallons. As a part of reassessing, I needed to count how much hydration I had with me, and that included checking the water reserves inside of the camper and anywhere else that I had water left. From my measurements, it didn't appear that the camper was moving, and there was a huge sigh of relief with that, as through the night, I went over some pretty crazy trail. Looking ahead of me, I could see the vast open desert. There was nowhere to go or no place to be more important than the place that I was at. The road appeared to go on for miles, and in the end, it really did. When I rechecked the map, I still had about 30 miles to go before I was probably going to hit pavement. And from the cell phone coverage overlay that I had on, I could see that was about 40 miles away. The new plan was even more simplified than the prior. For this, I was going to leave the hood up the whole time, as to still get miles in the heat of the day. From here on out, the water would be strictly rationed for drinking only. There's Olancha. The next major marker was Tea Kettle Junction, where I was faced with the proverbial fork in the road. Then I came up Lippincott Mine Road. Do I continue down this road, or do I follow my map? Now I'm off the map. Two things I knew were certain. I had researched the map I was using, and I knew there was a defined road at the end of the mapped trail. With the downloaded resolution, I couldn't quite tell what was beyond my line of sight if I continued straight. Therefore, I chose to take the road I knew. I was heading south from Tea Kettle Junction, following the mapped route up the hill and into the pass, which just so happened to align with letting the engine cool down. Since the temps were up, I needed to give the truck a few more minutes to cool off and decided to see the sights, as many say. But honestly, I was really just looking for a distraction. until this happened.
Hey! Look, I got an emergency strobe light!
Looking back,
Turn
I
around,
can clearly
go
see
get
my
it.
mental state was deteriorated.
Up
I wasn't making sound decisions.
here!
Although running through the middle of the desert toward a distant vehicle seemed like a glorious, magnificent option, looking back, I can see I had a ton to lose by doing this, and I had more than enough time to turn the truck around and chase them down with much greater odds of success. With my alarm going off, I walked back to the truck. Over and over, I considered different steps I could have made. And when I got back in the truck, I turned the key and headed deeper into the pass. But only a few minutes had passed this time before I realized I was on the wrong path. I quickly turned the truck around, got it up to about 45, and then turned it off and let it cruise nearly all the way back down the hill to the junction, where I continued on the path that I had left off. After another round of letting the truck cool off, I came to this conclusion. I'm parking right here in the middle of the road and taking a nap. If there's one, there's probably more, and this is likely the route they'll be traveling. So here I sat, exhausted and drifting off to dreamland. As I started to wake up, the sound kept getting louder. Finally, I was fully awake, but the sound kept getting louder, which really confused me for a moment until I turned around and saw an SUV pulling up to the back of my truck.
No, I blew my radiator
John
out.
was the first to introduce himself, and after that, I began breaking down what I had just gone through and the despair that I had perceived myself being in. I kindly asked if they had a phone which I could use, as I had no service with Verizon. John explained they also didn't have any service with AT&T, so I invited him to stand closer to my WeBoost transmitter. We couldn't believe our eyes. Bars started showing up, and there was just enough signal for me to get a call out. First and foremost, I called my wife, and I let her know that I was okay. Since she was at work, I left a message. Then I called the only person I could think of that could possibly help. Over the years and the countless visits to MCM Fab in Las Vegas, Matthew and I had become good friends. And with his intimate knowledge of Toyotas, I knew he may have some insight into what I could do in my particular situation. But I really didn't expect what happened next. He asked for the coordinates and said he'd help if he could. I quickly snapped a picture of the coordinates off my Gaia GPS app and sent the text. I honestly didn't know if it had gone through or not, because John and his friends needed to get going. They reassured me that they would ensure the text went out once they had service, and that there was a ranger station about 20 miles down the road. After a friendly farewell, they departed.
I should have recorded all this. I'm so sorry, guys. Called Matthew, and he informed me about the old egg trick, which I wasn't aware there was an old egg trick. Apparently, if you put about 12 eggs in the radiator and then fill it up with water. So, you know, I mean, up to a certain extent, right? So we'll see if that works.
My drive was renewed, and I was determined to push beyond the unknown. As the heat of the day climaxed at 110 degrees, several more cycles passed. During those cycles, I gave it several attempts and 20 egg whites, but the radiator was still hemorrhaging any fluid I added. Since I only had a few gallons of water remaining, and the water I did have was now being rationed, as gross as it may sound, much of the fluid that was being added was urine that I started saving shortly after the wreck.
Yeah, it's leaking pretty hard still. I'm not sure if that's going to hold much longer, but I'm going to get as far as I can. Well, we can. You can smell the eggs cooking with a little bit of urine in there. Don't tell anybody. But I didn't have enough water, so I used some pee.
From what I could measure on the map, I had about 14 miles to the ranger station. As I continued forward, the truck started to stall out. The motor was showing signs of being overheated and tired. The road suddenly became sloped downhill. With the hood up, I figured I could gather enough speed to cruise downhill as far as possible, then restart the motor only when needed.
Ghost riding the whip now. Engine's off. We're cruising. And we're just trying to make it. At this point, we just have to make it.
It seemed to work because I made short work of the next 10 miles, which was mostly downhill, to the Ubahibi crater. By the time I got to the crater, I could tell the truck was under a tremendous amount of stress.
Oh well about the rescue. There are sights to be seen. Pretty crazy. You're gonna like it.
On the next crank, the truck barely turned over and stalled out after a half mile. I had so many mixed emotions running through myself, but I knew I had to stay calm, let the truck rest, so I could continue on. The following 4 cycles felt like an eternity. The engine was rattling, shaking, and wanted nothing more than to stop in its place.
Am I neutral? Okay, I'm in neutral. Come on, baby. Just one more time for me. One more time. Come on, baby. One more time, one more time, one more time, one more time. Oh, thank God. Come on, one more time.
Nearly everyone I've spoken to about this event mentions something like the truck being a material object that can be replaced. I disagree. This is the truck that we took to the hospital for my child's liver transplant. This truck drove us halfway across the United States for a life-saving surgery after my child's transplant went haywire. It's more than just overlanding to us. It's the way for me to take my family across the unknown while maintaining a safe and clean environment. This truck, our Tundra, Everest, felt like he was a valued member of our family. And as such, I was devastated to ask for its sacrifice to be my savior. As I saw a small building in the distance, my phone started to light up. Tears started streaming down my face.
Oh shit, I got a text.
And I started to laugh and cry as I brought Everest to his final resting place. Moments later, a park ranger showed up and confirmed I was the guy stranded in the middle of Death Valley. As he was talking to me, Matthew was calling. As I answered the phone, Matthew breaks in with, "Where exactly are you? I'm in Furnace Creek, but I don't know where to go from here." I also had no idea. So I handed the phone to the park ranger, who gave him proper directions. The park ranger said Matthew was about 45 minutes away. I thanked the ranger numerous times as he had to get going. Shortly after he left, I heard a rumbling, the kind that only comes from a supercharged Tundra. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was Matthew, and he was pulling a trailer. We made quick work of getting the trailer loaded up, getting back on the road, and heading back to his shop. While Matthew was driving, I had a unique opportunity to reflect. After all the wild places I had experienced over the last 10 days, I was devastated to see the journey end here. But at the same time, I was filled with a deep happiness. Happiness I had the opportunity to see all the beauty along the way. Happiness that something could make me feel so devastated. It made me feel so alive in this experience here on Earth. But I guess it's all part of taking the bad with the good and making it a beautiful, unique experience. Pacific Crest, the series, Episode 5, Beyond the Unknown. Proudly presented by Norworld Australia. When your adventure demands built to last, demand Norworld. In association with 4-Wheel Campers. And from viewers like you, I truly appreciate and thank you for your continued support. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope to meet you on the trail, exploring the last remaining wild places in California. I'm Austin with WolfPac-Outdoors. I'll holler at you later.
Perfect.